Welcome to Pinnacle's betting preview of the 2025 Four Nations Face-Off. Canada, USA, Sweden, Finland. We are going to break it down and give you our picks to win the tournament. I'm Anthony Bruno, joined by Scott Cullen and Ben Barclay on behalf of Pinnacle, your trusted sportsbook for over 25 years, offering the best odds and best payouts in the market. All right, fellas, before we go around and give our analysis and our picks to win the tournament, I just want to set the stage and let everyone know the format of this tournament. So, obviously, it's just these four teams competing: Canada, USA, Sweden, and Finland. They will compete in a round robin. Each team is going to play 3 games. You get 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss, and 0 points for a regulation loss. So the 2 teams with the most points after the round robin will advance directly to the final on February 20th. This is going to be a very quick tournament. 1 regulation loss can completely bury you. So in saying that, let's now go around the table and talk about who we think is actually going to win this tournament. So Scott, I'm going to start things off with you. Who are you backing to win the Four Nations face-off?
Well, this hurts my heart, Anthony, but I have USA winning. And well, I look at Canada's roster and I love, the top end of the roster with McDavid and McKinnon and Makar, and like those players I think are the very peak of talent in this tournament. You look at the USA team and they have a ton of talent up front. The Tkachuk brothers and Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes, and they have enough depth if you go through their lineup that I think that they have maybe more scoring options than Canada, because Canada really, in their player selection, they were, I guess, sort of focusing on, they wanted grit for their, third and fourth lines. And I understand that's Canada's MO a lot of the time. But if you end up in a game in this tournament where all of a sudden the goals are hard to come by and you focused on grit, I'm worried that Canada has some forwards there who aren't going to be able to score. And so when I look at USA's depth of talent up front, I think is really great. I think their depth on the blue line is awesome. We don't know about Quinn Hughes' status. That is the one thing that sort of hangs over here, is that Quinn Hughes, who I think has been the best defenseman in the NHL this year, if he can play in the tournament, well then, the United States is in great shape. If not, they still have a really good blue line. Adam Fox and Charlie McAvoy and Jacob Slavin, they've got a great group back there. But if they have Hughes, it's obviously much better. And then you get to the goaltending, and this is the big difference maker across the whole thing. Is Connor Hellebuyck has been the best goalie in the world for the past 2 seasons. And yes, he flopped in the playoffs last year for Winnipeg, and you saw what happened in Winnipeg when that happened. But I think if Hellebuyck plays anything remotely like he has in the NHL the past 2 years, that has to make the USA the favorite.
Yeah, Scott, you're breaking all of our hearts here, taking Team USA.
It hurts me, man.
Well, one thing I should mention is that at most sports books, Team USA is actually the betting favorite, but at Pinnacle, Team USA is not the favorite. Canada right now is the betting favorite at plus 157. USA is at plus 174. Sweden at plus 401, and Finland at plus 652. So if you do want to back the Americans, you are getting a phenomenal price at Pinnacle. All right, so Scott, you laid out the case for Team USA. Ben, who are you going to be backing to win it all?
So I'll be going against Scott with this one.
How dare
it's Team Canada for me. As Scott mentioned, the top-end talent for Canada, and most importantly for me, what they can do up the middle in this tournament, going from McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, Braden Point, no particular order, and then even wanting to shift out McKinnon to the wing where you can. I think that's going to be really hard to deal with in all situations for the U.S. and the other teams as well. We're turning this into a bit of a Canada-U.S.
Yeah.
I don't know if Anthony's going to go the other way, any of the other teams. But other than that, too, they have the best defenseman in this tournament, I think, in Cale Makar. I do agree the depth of the U.S. defenseman, I do prefer a little more. Losing Pietrangelo hurts. We still don't know who a replacement is going to be there. But Makar's ability to play in every situation, I think, will be huge, as well as his continuity with Devon Toews and Nathan McKinnon playing in all situations as well. And then to get to the goaltending, too, I'm not making as much of a big deal of it as kind of others are. Connor Hellebuyck, yes, best goaltender in the world. Of course, you'd want to have him in there. but it's going to be Jordan Binnington or Aiden Hill. I think the edge of having those three great goaltenders isn't as big as we think. It's a 5-game tournament max. They're not going to be playing that many games. Ride the hot hand. Aiden Hill and Jordan Binnington, they've both risen to the occasion when the lights have gotten brighter. In Stanley Cup Finals, again, or 4 teams that are defensive stalwart, can roll all 4 lines, which I expect Canada to be with the grit and the lineup depth that they have that Scott mentioned. So I think the defensive structure will lead the way for Canada. I don't think they're going to have problems scoring unless Connor Hellebuyck stands on his head, which very well could happen. But my team to pick it is Team Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to disagree with both of you guys. I think you both made great points. Scott, you're on Team USA. Ben, I think that's a pretty good handicap for Canada. I'll break the tie here. I don't know. Did you guys think I was going with like
Anthony's
Finland
with
to
Sweden.
win this thing? I am also going with Team Canada to win the Four Nations face-off. And I'll break it down. And honestly, I'm going to echo a lot of the same points that Ben just made. I think the biggest difference here is literally the top end of the roster with McDavid and McKinnon. Now, who knows how these lines are actually going to shake out? Like Ben, you mentioned maybe McKinnon potentially could shift to the wing. Maybe they'll play McKinnon and McDavid on the same line. But just thinking about dealing with Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon down the middle playing 25 minutes a game, that just seems like an absolute nightmare for the opposition. So I get that maybe the bottom end of Canada's roster, when you look at their forward group, isn't as talented perhaps as Team USA, although I still think Canada has a ton of talent across the entire forward group. But just dealing with those two guys down the middle for an entire game is an absolute nightmare for the opposition. And then on defense, it's the same thing with Cale Makar. I think he's the best defenseman in the world. The continuity with Devon Taves. Now, losing Pietrangelo, that's not great for Canada, because what Canada had, and no other team really in the tournament had this, is that you had teammates with those top 2 pairs on defense. You know, with Taves and Makar, and then obviously with Theodore and Pietrangelo. Now, that's going to hurt Canada a little bit, because in a very short tournament, that continuity, I think, matters. How much does it matter? I don't know. I think that's kind of tough to quantify. But it's the same thing that I said with the centermen. You have Makar and Taves, who are going to be playing a ton of minutes. They know each other so well. I just think it's going to be so difficult for the opposition to deal with the top-end talent on this roster. I am also not as worried about the goaltending. It's kind of crazy, because I think Canada's 3 best goaltenders right now are not on the roster, which is absolutely insane. But I think when you are playing behind a team that is this talented, you know, whether it's Aiden Hill, Jordan Binnington, I know their numbers don't look great this year, but I think they're going to be fine. Could it be the difference if it's a Canada-USA, and, you know, could it come down to goaltending? It could, but I agree with Ben. I don't think it's going to matter as much as we think in a very short tournament when you're playing behind a team that's this good. So I am also riding with Team Canada. All right. Next up, let's talk about the other 2 teams real quick. Do you guys think there is any value in backing either Sweden or Finland? And we can start with Scott on this one.
Well, I'll say this. Before Miro Heiskanen got injured, I was thinking Finland had a decent shot as the long shot team, because they typically outpunch their weight in international tournaments. And you can look at, they have some decent top-end talent. I mean, but I think the area where it really hits home that they're not up to the same level is on defense, where Heiskanen was kind of the one guy they have who you could consider a real Norris Trophy contender, and the rest of the guys are just solid NHL defenders. And I think, you know, without Heiskanen, it's going to be a bit of a problem for them. And so going into the tournament, when they announced the rosters, I was kind of looking at Finland as, maybe there's something there. Without their top defenseman, I can't see it happening. When it comes to Sweden, I think Sweden is another team that they have lots of talent. I think one of the issues is some of their, you know, guys who've been their most talented players have had tough seasons in the NHL, right? Like Mika Zibanejad is just starting to come around now that he's got JT Miller in New York, and now we're waiting to see if Elias Pettersson can get his game together now that JT Miller is out of Vancouver. But the two of them, if they kind of bring their best version to the tournament, then I think Sweden's forward group is a little bit more impressive. Gives them a better chance because their defense is quite solid. I mean, between Carlson and Hedman and so on, I think they've got a decent group back there. But they're going to need somebody to do the scoring, and when you compare them to USA and Canada, I don't think Sweden has the high end forwards to do it, and so they really need the guys like. I point out Zibanejad and Pettersson as guys who have underachieved this year, and they need them to kind of give their best in an international play. And that wouldn't be the first time that's happened. I mean, we've seen all kinds of players who play in the National Hockey League and are okay in the National Hockey League, and then when they play in an international tournament for Sweden, they're better than that. And so that's kind of what I think Sweden is dependent on this time.
How about you, Ben? Do you think there's any value in backing either one of these teams? Because it looks like Scott is not going to be looking at those teams at all. He's all Team USA in this one. But Ben, what are your thoughts on Sweden and Finland?
So I'd only see some value in Sweden now with the Heiskanen injury. That's a huge blow for Finland, and I'd need some sort of a better price, maybe in the plus 800s, plus 900s to even think about putting something on Finland. Scott's right. They do punch above their weight in these kind of tournaments. They're scrappy always, so they won't be an easy out still. But Sweden with Allmark, whoever's going to play a net, capable goalies of, getting hot for 4 games, stealing something. And I do think there is enough comparable talent throughout the Sweden roster to a Canada and the US, not at the same level, but it comes back to this being such a short tournament. Anything can happen. Anthony mentioned it in the intro. You drop one regulation game, that could set you way back, and all of a sudden we see a Finland or a Sweden in the final, and then you're 1 win away, something like that. So based on the duration of the tournament, there is maybe some value on Sweden. I won't be making that bet myself, but I can make a case for Sweden, not Finland without Heiskanen now.
Yeah, Ben, I mean, we're pretty much in agreement across the board during this entire show because I agree. Like, I think Sweden is worth a look. And you guys said it about Miro Heiskanen. Like, Finland losing Heiskanen is such a massive blow because if you look at their D-core, it's just not very good. Like, I think, they have some quality players up front. I think they're a little bit more talented than people realize up front. But on defense, I think that's where the true hole is on that team. Whereas when you look at Sweden, I know, Scott, you mentioned it, like if Pettersson and Zibanejad, who are not having great seasons in the NHL, if they can just kind of find something to kind of match, the centerman that they're going to be going up against when it comes to Team USA and Team Canada, I think they're going to have a chance because you look at their blue line, they have a pretty damn good blue line, Sweden.
Yeah,
and even their goaltending as well. Like, I know Markstrom's out, but whether it's going to be Gustafsson or Allmark, like they're both having good seasons. They're both good goaltenders. Like if Sweden, and I believe the first game is actually Canada-Sweden. Like if Sweden wins that game, I mean, then things are going to get very interesting. So, I mean, that's really all it takes, right? You have one upset victory, and if it's a regulation victory, and then all of a sudden you're cooking and you're in business. So I think there's maybe a little bit of value on Sweden. I do agree with Ben. I'm probably not going to be looking at any other team outside of Canada. So yeah, I do like Canada at plus 157. All right, let's shift our focus back to Canada for a second. Is the goaltending, and I know, Ben, me and you kind of touched on this already, but how about we start with Scott on this one? Like, how big of a concern is this when you look at who they have in net compared to Team USA?
Well, the point that you've both made about the how short the tournament is basically the saving grace here for Canada. Like, if this was something that was going to be playing an entire season, you'd be like, oh gosh, no, they're definitely not going to be able to overcome that deficit in goal. But in the course of 5 games, sure you can, because goaltending is wildly unpredictable in small samples. And, who's to say that over 10 days, Jordan Binnington won't be the best goaltender in the world? He could be. And as we've talked about, Canada has a very strong defense in front of them. And if they can kind of limit the chances, well, then maybe it doesn't matter that you don't have a great goaltender. Now, given the choice, yes, I would prefer to have Connor Hellebuyck there. But if Hellebuyck, we've seen him struggle over short periods too. It happened in last year's playoffs. And so, you can kind of play the probability here that, yes, I would prefer to have Connor Hellebuyck, but it's hardly inconceivable that, Aiden Hill or Jordan Binnington are the ones who play better over a 2-week period.
How about you, Ben? Is this a big enough concern? Now, I know you're backing Canada and you don't think it's a huge concern, but is there that thought in the back of your head like, oh my God, this could go south real quick if with these goaltenders on Team Canada?
Oh, definitely. I played out all the scenarios in my head. And I'll say again, in my defense of Hill and Binnington earlier, I know they're capable, and I think they are. It's more of a frustration for me that Logan Thompson isn't there.
Yes.
He is, I believe, first or second in the NHL in goals save above expected with Connor Hellebuyck. Yeah. That could have been a matchup for the ages. And when I mentioned, too, with the Blues Cup run, Vegas, how they are now, when they won the Cup with Hill and Binnington in net, teams that will roll four lines, defensively sound in structure, great defense on the back end. That's what the Washington Capitals are right now, who I think are a perennial Cup contender, and Logan Thompson's having the season of his life behind them. I think if you plug Logan Thompson into this net for Canada, he's just picking up where he left off in similar structure with the Washington Capitals. So, again, not as worried as maybe I should be, but with the duration of the tournament, like Scott said, it's not going to be like a 7-game series, 2 7-game series where this could crumble down. Montembeault, not really a factor for me unless there's an injury. But again, not even sure why he's there or coming along with some of the other options available.
I just think it's so ridiculous that they name these rosters so early, because honestly, it pains me. Like, okay, for full transparency, we're all Canadian here. Like, I think, in our hearts, we kind of all want Canada to win this tournament, but we're also going to break this down. We're looking at the numbers. We're attacking this from a betting perspective. But just thinking about how early they name these rosters, and I'm looking at the numbers, whether it's save percentage, goals saved above expected. The three best Canadian goaltenders right now are Logan Thompson, Darcy Kemper, and Mackenzie Blackwood. And none of those guys are on this roster. Yeah. That is very concerning to me. But again, it goes back to my point. Like, I think McDavid and McKinnon, when they're playing at their best, are the two best players in the world. And then you could argue that Canada actually is the three best players in the world if you want to lump Cale Makar into that. And I think having all that talent, having the continuity on defense, having just talent across the entire roster is going to mask some of the goaltending, I guess, issues that could pop up in this tournament for Team Canada. But again, I'm not overly worried about it. I think either Hill or Binnington, and honestly, even if it does get to the point where they turn to Montembeault, like, I actually think he might be okay as well. So again, I'm not too concerned, just more frustrated with how early these rosters were named. The last thing I want to get to, there's a big debate right now in terms of who will be the replacement for Alex Pietrangelo, who withdrew from the tournament. Now, maybe by the time we post this thing, they're going to already name a replacement, but I want to go around here and I want everyone to give their top replacement for Pietrangelo on Team Canada. Ben, let's start with you.
So it might be going a little even off the board with this one to start. There are names out there. Drew Doughty's the popular pick, but I would go with Mackenzie Weegar of the Calgary Flames as of right now. I think he's put together a very, very solid season, and he's been doing it for years on end, it seems now. He's in his prime. He's the lead defenseman back there on a surging Calgary team. He's a good possession guy, as well as being able to kind of do it all when it comes to a two-way game. I want between him and Bouchard, but I want someone with possession numbers and kind of match these American defensemen. I've already got good guys on Canada for that in Makar, Morrissey, etc. So I double down there with Mackenzie Weegar, not overthink it. And I don't think you'd notice him too much out there, which is exactly what you want when it comes to this.
Love it. Wasn't expecting you to go Mackenzie Weegar, but I think it's a really solid pick. Now, Scott, you mentioned before we came on that there's like 5 guys in your head that are in play to take this spot. And really there's like a bunch of guys to choose from. But if you had to pick one guy to replace Petro, who are you picking?
Well, okay, I'm going to say this with the disclaimer that I was going to take Mackenzie Weegar because for all the reasons that Ben stated, he's a right shot defenseman the same way as Pietrangelo. I think he would be an excellent pick. But if I'm going to, pick someone else, I think Thomas Chabot of the Ottawa Senators, he's had an excellent season. And now, I don't suspect that he's going to get it. I think it's probably going to be like Weegar or Drew Doughty are the most likely cases. But if you look at Chabot's numbers this year, like, he's been excellent. And, probably better than people would expect. And so that I don't suspect that he's going to be the one who gets named. One, he's a left shot defender, and if you really want a right shot guy to replace him, then that's not it. But he would be my pick. If I wanted to go defensively, Anthony, I'm gonna extend this. If I wanted defensive guys, Toronto Maple Leafs, you take Chris Tanev. If you look at his shot suppression numbers, they're awesome. And if not him, Adam Pelech, the Islanders. Very similar profile in guys who really are great at shot suppression, and they play tough minutes and really don't get a lot of fanfare, which in some ways that might fit the Canadian mold, given who they took kind of at the low end of their forward depth chart. But having said all this, I'm in agreement here with Ben on Mackenzie Weegar.
All right, so both of you are on Mackenzie Weegar. I know, Scott, obviously you mentioned Shabbat as well. I did not see the Shabbat coming. Jeez.
Me either.
Wow. But no, I think you made a really good point. Like, it all kind of depends what this Team Canada brass is looking for. Like, if they want more of a steady, kind of low-event defenseman, then they can go with, like, a Chris Tanev, as you mentioned. Or do they want more of an offensive guy? Now, for the last 24 hours, I've just been saying, just plug Drew Doughty in there. It just makes a ton of sense. Veteran guy, has played for Canada several times. He's won 2 Olympic gold medals. He's coming back from injury, but he's hit the ground running in terms of his workload. But then when I dig into the numbers on Drew Doughty, I'm like, oh my Lord, his 5-on-5 numbers are terrible since he came back.
But still.
Yeah, I'm not impressed with the underlying numbers I've seen on Doughty. And again, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he just came back from injury. I'm going to go with Evan Bouchard. And maybe this is a little controversial because he's viewed as more of an offensive defenseman. I think he's a really good player. If you look at his possession numbers, the Oilers control a ton of shots, a ton of the 5-on-5 chances. You look at expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5. Bouchard has excellent numbers. If they need a spark on the power play, I think Cale Makar should be running the power play, but let's say maybe things aren't going Canada's way and they're kind of struggling on the power play. It's a guy you can easily slot in there, has an incredible shot, has the continuity with Connor McDavid. So why not? And even looking at what he did in the playoffs last year, he was incredible for Edmonton in that playoff run. And even going back the year before that, he's stepped up big time for Edmonton in the playoffs. And I think he'd be a great addition. I know it's a little controversial, but that's my pick, Evan Bouchard.
Well,
all right.
And having his familiarity with Connor McDavid, that would not hurt. Part of the deal, as you've mentioned, with having this tournament on really not much time to practice or anything, is having teammates who are already going to understand each other and know how to play together. There's going to be value to that.
Yeah, I had Bouchard on my radar as well when it comes to possession too. Handles the puck a lot. I think it'd be good for them. And just to go back to Scott Shabbat point, not someone I had on my radar, but now that you mention it, Sens fan myself, watch a lot of Sens hockey. He is playing the best hockey I've seen him play in his career since he's got a steady partner, and I think it could work. Fingers crossed.
I love it. We definitely got to clip that out if Shabbat actually replaces Pietrangelo. Scott, what a call on Thomas Shabbat. I love it. But, all right, no, listen, guys, I think that was a great breakdown. Any final thoughts from any of you guys before we close this thing out?
Okay, my final thought is I'm not sure I really want my pick to win, so that kind of stinks, but that's where I am right now.
For me, just to go back to Canada once more, when it comes to the bottom 6 in the way they've structured this roster, I think their penalty kill and what they'll be able to do against other guys' top forwards. Of course, you can roll McDavid, Crosby. They can play in all situations. But John Cooper's familiarity, if he wanted to get Anthony Cirelli, who injured now and might not be there, unfortunately, but he'd have him and Brandon Hagel as top penalty kill duo. And then you got guys like Marchand, Stone, who can kind of do it all too. Can't contribute offensively, but they're there. They're going to be there to play against the best guys, I think, too. So another reason why I think Canada's structure and defense will lead the way, even from the forward group.
Oh, I love it, guys. The last point I'll make is actually even John Cooper. I know we didn't really talk about the coaching, but I have full trust in John Cooper to press the right buttons. And I don't really know how much coaching is going to matter in a tournament like this. these teams are all so talented across the board. Even Sweden and Finland, who obviously aren't expected to win this tournament, like there's a ton of talent. It's really hard to screw up as a coach. But I have full faith in John Cooper to press the right buttons for Canada. And you mentioned it, Ben, with the continuity with the two Lightning guys that you can run out there on the penalty kill, playing against other teams' top players. Like there's just so many options at Cooper's disposal with players that have continuity playing in the NHL together. And I just think he's going to make the right decisions and not screw this up for Team Canada. So those are my final thoughts. But that is going to do it for our Four Nations Face-Off betting preview for Pinnacle. If you are betting on the futures for this tournament, you are doing yourself a disservice if you are not checking out Pinnacle Sportsbook. As I mentioned before, especially if you want to bet on Team USA, Pinnacle essentially has the best price in market on the U.S. To win this tournament. So, listen, I'm Canadian. You guys are Canadian. I think we all want Canada to win. But, Team USA, it's hard to ignore the talent on that roster and the price offered right now at Pinnacle. So make sure you are checking out Pinnacle before you're putting down any bets for the Four Nations Face-Off. That is going to do it. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the tournament. It is going to be amazing. And remember to bet smart and bet Pinnacle.